In this lecture, we are going to talk about loops and nested loops. So, a loop statement allows us to execute a statement or group of statements multiple times. It repeatedly loops until a particular condition is satisfied. What's crucial that there are three types of loops: the for loop or the for each loop, the while loop, and the do while loop. And there are two types of loop control statements. So with the help of the break statement and the continue statement, we are able to control these loops: the for loop, the while loop, and the do while loop. So as far as the for loop is concerned, we have to define the starting value, we have to define the condition, so we start with I equals to 0, while the value of I is smaller than 4, and we have to define what we are going to do in every iteration. In every iteration, we are going to increment the value of I, and after that, in every iteration, the code is going to be executed. In this case, we just print out the value of I. So this is why we print out 0, 1, 2, 3, and after the 3 is incremented, so I++, the value is going to be 4. 4 is not smaller than 4, so this statement is going to be false, and if the statement is false, then Java is going to terminate the for loop. Okay, we can do the same with the for each loop. As you can see, we don't have to specify the three conditions. Here we iterate through the colors one-dimensional array of strings, so we know for certain that it's going to be a string. We have to use the name of the variables, and then we have to define the one-dimensional array itself. Sorry for that, the valid syntax is something like this, by the way. So this is how we can print out red, green, blue, and yellow. What about the while loop? The while loop is going to have just a single statement, and if the statement is true, then it is going to be execute the given code snippet. So for example, the initial value of I is equals to 0, which is smaller than 3, so it prints out the value of I, and then it increments the value of I. 1 is smaller than 3, so it prints out 1, then it increments the value. 2 is smaller than 3, so it prints out the value and increment the value. 3 is smaller or equal to 3, so it prints out 3, but after the incrementation, 4 is no longer smaller or equal to 3, so this is when Java is going to terminate the while loop. On the other hand, the do while loop is going to do some operation, and after that it's going to check a given statement. So as you can see, the while loop is going to check the statement, and if the statement is true, then it's going to do some operations. On the other hand, do while loop is going to do some operations, and after that it's going to check a given condition. So for example, in this case, I is not greater than 100, but the value of I is going to be incremented and going to be printed out because it is a do while loop. So at the beginning we do some operations. Here we just print out the incremented value of I. This is why 1 is going to be printed out. And then we check some condition. 1 is not greater than 100, which means that the condition is false and Java is going to terminate the do while loop. Okay, so while is going to check the condition at the beginning, while on the other hand, the do while loop is going to check the condition after doing a given operation. Okay, we can use the break and the continue statements in order to control the given loops. With the help of the break, we are able to break out of the loop. So as you can see, we iterate until I is smaller than 10, but if the value of I is equals to 4, then we break. What does it mean? That as you can see, 0, 1, 2, 3, and after calling the break, the for loop is over. It is not going to consider the next values. On the other hand, the continue is going to jump to the next iteration. As you can see, if I is equals to 2, then we don't print out the value of I, we just continue, which means that 0, 1, 3, and 4. As you can see, if the value is 2, then we keep going and consider the next iteration. So this is the main difference between break and continue. With the help of break, we terminate the for loop. With the help of continue, we jump to the next iteration. what about nested loops? The placing of one loop inside the body of another loop is called nesting. In other words, if a loop exists inside the body of another loop, it's called nested loop. In this case, the outer loop takes control of the number of complete repetitions of the inner loop. For example, like this, we have a for loop, and then within the for loop we have another for loop. This is how we are able to make two-dimensional structures. For example, we can initialize two-dimensional arrays or matrices. So if we use just a single for loop, it has something to do with a one-dimensional array. If we use two for loops, so the second for loop is an inner for loop, then we are able to deal with a two-dimensional array. If we use three nested for loops, then we are able to deal with a three-dimensional array. So basically, it has something to do with the number of dimensions we are considering. As you can see, we are able to do something like this, that in the first line there's just a single asterisk. The second line contains two asterisks, then three asterisks and four asterisks, because the inner for loop is something like this. The j starts with 0, and while j is less than I, we keep incrementing the value of j. Sorry for that. So the second for loop has something to do with the index j, and the first loop has something to do with index I. So in the second loop, of course, we keep incrementing j, and this is how we end up with something like this. We can do the same with a nested for each loop. We can iterate through a one-dimensional array of strings, the outer for loop, and in the inner for loop we can iterate through a one-dimensional array of integers, and we print out the string and the value of the integer, up 1, up 2, down 1, down 2. So we can do a nested for loop with for each loop as well. Okay, what about optional labels? We can have a name for each Java for loop. To do so, we use labels before the for loops. It is useful if we have a nested for loop so that we can break or continue the exact loop we want. We will see an example for the use of labels and for nested loops in the coming lectures. So as you can see, the outer loop has the label outer loop, and the nested loop has the label inner loop. And with the help of the loop control statements such as break or continue, we can specify what loop we are considering, outer loop or the inner loop. We are going to take a look at a concrete example in the next lecture, and it's going to be clear. Thanks for watching.